I got to tell you, I think it was highly successful. And this is just the first of many events to counter the narrative to, these globalists that are basically pushing an agenda of global extermination. And they'll do it by any means possible.
Dr. Zelenko became a household name when he developed his world-famous Zelenko protocol. To make sure that everybody had access to his immune-boosting formula, he created Z-Stack, my family's immune-boosting supplement of choice. Along with Z-Detox, Z-Flu, and Z-Shield, Z-Stack has helped countless families stay healthy and protected. With every purchase of Dr. Zelenko's products, you also support the Zelenko Freedom Foundation in their tireless work to promote and reinstate medical freedom for all. Click the link down below, use coupon code INSPIRE to save, and protect your family today. Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another Inspired Conversation. And as she said to me off camera, it's been a while. And so we're so thankful to have her back, our dear friend, the one and only Ann Vandersteel. Thank you so much for joining us today.
John, it's always great to see you. And yeah, it's been a hot minute, been too long, but really great to see you again. And of course, your energy exudes. It comes right through the camera. I can feel the peace, the love, and the hope for the things to come.
Oh, thank you, Ann. You just came back from an interesting trip where you were in Aspen, talking about the Aspen Institute and everything around that. So run us through what's happening in your life right now and what is on your radar, please.
It's really crazy, the clues that are presenting themselves, whether God is moving through this or there's other hands or both. But there's definitely something happening right now. And so first of all, big shout out to Sharona Bishop. She's America's Mom. She's on Lindell TV. She's on Facebook as well. And her incredible production team led by Chris Tribble over at truthformediafoundation.org. He does a great job producing her show. They decided to take on the Aspen Institute, which has Little America's Davos. They meet in Aspen for 2 weeks. And Sharona said, let's take on the health piece while they're covering their several days of meetings and have, agenda items to address health in America. Why don't we have our own counter to their narrative, which we know to be false and lies? So she invited myself, Christy Hutcherson, Mickey Willis to attend and do public speaking and engage the residents that live in Aspen, and to also provide information to those attending the Aspen Ideas Fest to actually hear counter narratives or counter truths to their narrative of lies, which frankly, I think after 3 years of
I love the idea of going kind of into the eye of the storm where things are happening and presenting a counter energy, really, because that's what it is. One is dark, one is light. And also to see the fear, because that's what always happens. I remember 15 years ago, when you remember the Bilderberg meetings really just started coming up as, public knowledge, when they denied they even existed, the Bilderbergers, for decades, right?
Right.
And then, Alex Jones and his crew and everyone showed up at these events. And I remember these people would stay locked up in their luxury hotels and wouldn't come out. And they would say, there were some leaked audios where people would say, these people shouldn't be here. How can they afford to travel and not work and expose us like this? And they were afraid. And you can see 15 years later, we've come so far. These people are scared of us. The Fauci's and all the others, they are rightfully scared. Let's be honest, because they will get their, maybe not their day in court, but justice will be served. However it will be served. There's always an ultimate justice.
And we saw it play out, frankly. On Thursday, we gathered in a big municipal field behind the police department, which is a gorgeous structure. It's the municipal police department, their courthouse, if you will, their big public structure there in Aspen, $37 billion structure, beautiful. Across the street is this giant open field where we had on a hill on the field, a nice tent. We had a great sound system set up, and we had folks that were there to see us come and gather. But because we were talking over a loud system, over a PA system, other people who were in the field playing, doing whatever, bicycles, passerbys, stopped to listen to what we were saying. And eventually we got quite a crowd that was organically forming just because we were talking about the events. This was not a Trump event. In fact, this wasn't about politics at all. It was about true body sovereignty, the fact that God created all man to be free. He gave us dominion over the earth, which includes your land, your air, your water. That's your law. And that was really the message we were putting forth. And we were talking about how the Davos demons essentially want to strip all of that away. And they have a completely different agenda. And again, we never talked about presidents or heads of state. It had everything to do with a global elite class that none of us elected, that should have no jurisdiction over what we do and how we live. Yet somehow we succumb and we give away our freedom to these people, and we allow them through their corporations and the public-private partnerships and all of the agencies of the United States government, which are for-profit entities, the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, the DoD. They're all for-profit. So that public-private partnership has been allowed to usurp our personal constitutional freedom, and it should never have been. I mean, it doesn't even apply to us at all. Yet people are uneducated, again, by design, thanks to the for-profit Department of Education and changing our entire textbooks. We don't know what we don't know. So we were there to educate, and it really had an impact. And what was interesting is we wrapped up the afternoon in the park before we had a big event back at our hotel where I presented some information to a packed house. We wrapped up in prayer, Jean, and we prayed to reclaim the land in Aspen for God and for righteousness, to exercise any evil out, right? We reclaimed Aspen for good. And 2 days later, a very unusual event happened where the head of the Crown family, Jim Crown, who is the head of the Aspen Institute, which was putting on this little Davos event, on his 70th birthday, died in a single car accident on a racetrack in an open field where there's no walls or anything for you to run into. But he had multiple blunt force traumas to the head, which is really crazy.
And wait, the car didn't even flip as far as I read.
No.
Yeah.
So this is what is so bizarre about all this, that he passed in this race car accident, which seems rather strange. So he passes away. He's part of General Dynamics. He's connected also. He's on the board of directors for JP Morgan Chase, tied in with the Epstein scandal, all the financing, all the money. And let's not forget, JP Morgan originally avoided getting on the Titanic, but was around to start the Federal Reserve. And then, of course, we had this Titanic sub where a billionaire lost his life as well, looking at the Titanic. All this happened sort of in the same time period, which is a strange story because I had a prophetic word about a year ago where I believe that the biggest bank to go down, that will really be the cascade for the demise of the US dollar, is going to be JP Morgan Chase, because I believe it's biblical. It's only fitting that they should crash and burn, considering they're the reason we have this fiat currency and a debt slave society to begin with. So I feel like the shackles are coming off, and we're starting to see everything, and God is revealing what we need to see so that we can be prepared for this global reset. But I believe eventually it's going to be the reset for good. We're just going to have to suffer a little pain along the way to wake everybody up.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the legal system and God's law, the law of the land, and what actually applies to human beings versus legal fictions?
Sure. So again, getting back to the first statement, God gave man dominion over the earth. That's the water, the air, the land, right? Your water being your admiralty court, the air being ecclesiastical courts, and land being common law. And of course, the devil always reverses everything. So WAL becomes LAW. And in law, you have a legal system. Legal and lawful are not the same thing. And unfortunately, what has happened is that through word salad and obfuscation of the truth, we now have a corporate government that's run by lawyers. And if you go back in history and you look at the original 13th Amendment that was published in 1819, it talks about no titles of nobility shall serve in Congress. Titles of nobility would be kings, queens, princes, esquires. And as we know today, squires, obviously knights, but esquires being lawyers and bankers, or attorneys and bankers, those are considered titles of nobility. Now, we actually have two forms of government running this country right now. We have a legislative democracy known as the Corporation of the United States District of Columbia, USDC. That was formed in 1871 under the Organic Act of 1871, which was predecessed, by the way, in 1868, the 14th Amendment, which made everybody a U.S. citizen. Now, prior to the 14th Amendment, from 1776 till 1868, we obviously had the War of 1812, we had the Civil War, and through the tumult of all that, they changed that 13th Amendment about no titles of nobility serving in government to rewriting it in 1865 and making it about freeing the slaves and involuntary servitude. 3 years later in 1868, making everybody U.S. citizens. People revolted against that. They didn't want to be U.S. citizens. They wanted to be a citizen of the state in which they resided because we were all like individual nation states. We were a union of them, and we decided to create the federal government to just serve for the common defenses of all the nation states that were living in harmony together with free trade amongst all the states. They then incorporated the federal government 3 years after making us U.S. citizens, which made us municipal servants or employees, if you will, to the federal government. We work for the federal government. And as we now know, that then became a contract through your birth certificate later on in 1907. And then, of course, with the Social Security Act later passed then, everything became a contract of you, the private man or woman, became a corporate vessel with your all caps name. If you look at your driver's license, your passport, your bank statements, everything is in a contract with an all capital name because you have been fictionalized or corporatized by the United States corporate government so they can contract with you and trick you into getting your privileges of Social Security, healthcare, welfare, student loans, all that stuff, when in fact, those are not rights, they're privileges, but you must fund them. And that's the contract between you and the government to fund and then be able to extract the privilege of Social Security. So this has been nothing but a giant fraud perpetrated on the Americans. We did not understand it when we were born. Our parents just gave us a birth certificate and a Social Security number because they thought that's what you do. And in fact, they were forcing you into involuntary servitude with the federal government, making you a corporate debt slave as a corporate fiction of yourself. So what I've done is I have now dismantled that status of a U.S. citizen from my name. I've returned myself to my upper and lowercase spelling of my name, and I have stripped that corporate fiction from me, and I've separated it out as a vessel that it is, that has nothing to do with me. And I've separated myself from the United States as just an American national, which is a protected class under the Secretary or Department of State.
Can you speak about your own spiritual journey that led you to this place?
I'm so glad you asked that question because people all the time say, well, do you have to pay taxes? And what if you get pulled over for a traffic ticket? I say, yeah, but that's not the reason that you do this. You either do this because principally you are fundamentally aligned with what our Creator wanted by the creation of his second covenant nation, the United States of America, or you're not. And you have to align with the divine before you can embark on a journey like this, because you have to fully understand what America was about, why it was created, and why it should be so protected by, and it has been protected by the divine, and why we were entrusted by our founding fathers to carry forward and perform our civic duty. I mean, if you look at your Declaration of Independence and your Constitution, I have copies of it all over my desk. I'm always reading it and looking and finding new ways to see things, and how I'm like, oh, I didn't see it that way. This makes it more clear to me. You understand that you have a civic duty as an American to defend what our founding fathers laid down their lives for, their sacred honor, right? Their fortune. I think fundamentally it's the principle of freedom. God made every man to be free. There was never, have this government, build a government so that, you can be governed by somebody else and told what to do. No. That's an insurrection. And when you find your congressmen and senators that have the audacity to tell you what they're going to do without asking you what you want, that's an insurrection. They stole our country on November 3rd. They committed an insurrection with the FBI and the Department of Justice and co-conspirators inside that federal legislative democracy that's in a corporation, a foreign corporation in US DC.
How do you view, let's say, an RFK Jr.? How do you view a Trump, which are really the only two viable, strong options in terms of popularity right now?
I want to just touch on something before I answer that question really quickly. I submit to the audience that right now we're at that pivotal moment to rebirth America, like you said. And while we revere our founding fathers 250 years ago, I submit to your audience that we, the people right now, can be just as revered as having saved the republic and rebirthed this great nation. Yet again, I hope the same people who are freedom fighters like yourself and myself and everybody that watches your show look to us as the greatest generation that saved and rebirthed the republic. I think that we can be equally as revered as we respect and admire and appreciate what these brave men did 250 years ago. So now onto your question about whether or not RFK Jr. or Trump. I think RFK has been very good for the health freedom movement. He's done a lot to expose